Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 3rd, 2014, and it is day 27 of Operation Protective Edge. Late last night, the IDF confirmed that the Givati Brigade officer Hadar Goldin, who according to initial assessments had been captured in Gaza on Friday morning in a Hamas attack, had been killed. Earlier, the family of Hadar Goldin held an emotional press conference imploring the government not to leave their son behind in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister had announced earlier that the IDF will soon redeploy its troops when the work of demolishing Hamas tunnels is done, but reiterated that, quote, all options are open for how the operation continues from here. Some troops have already pulled out of Gaza, having completed their specific missions. The deaths in Friday's attack in Rafah brought the IDF toll to 64. 3 civilians have also been killed on the Israeli side, and Gazan health officials put the death toll there at some 1,700. This morning, rocket sirens sounded around the southern region of Israel, and we're going to try to make sense of it all this morning. Here with me in studio is senior defense correspondent of Haaretz, Amir Oren. Good morning, Amir.
Good morning, Gillian.
I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waked. Good morning. And I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Tal, I'm going to start with you. Yesterday, Netanyahu held a press conference along with the defense minister, giving a few different messages, and still, I would say most of the Israeli population doesn't know where we stand today.
Well, I think most of the Israeli population is starting to comprehend that this is the beginning of the end of a protective edge, and that contrary to maybe some of the expectations of the public, there will not be any crushing victory here for Israel. After a very long cabinet meeting on Friday night, the Israeli Security Cabinet decided not to deepen the operation. It decided to, at this moment, give up ceasefire attempts. I'm stressing at this moment, and move to a unilateral, gradual withdrawal of the IDF forces. The idea, as Netanyahu and Ya'alon explained yesterday, is that there is no point at leaving the soldiers in areas of fracture where there can be exposed to various incidents from Hamas point of view, but Israel is still reserving the right to continue. It will withdraw to some kind of security barrier on the border, and it will reserve the right to continue aerial strikes and to continue targeting the tunnels. We're
going to get now a quick also update from the spokesperson of the IDF, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. Peter, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Could you outline what the IDF is doing now within the Gaza Strip?
So I think perhaps maybe I'll just touch where Tal was leaving off.
Perfect.
Just beforehand, as far as crushing a decisive victory. I think if Hamas comes out of their tunnels and their holes where they're hiding at the moment, they'll look around and they'll see that they've invested in a huge tunnel network, about $100 million, which is completely destroyed. They will look at their infrastructure, which is mostly destroyed. They will look at the operatives that they've trained and try to bring them to a level that can sustain extensive damage, and they'll see that many hundreds of them have been killed in action. They will look at the leaderships that are living in fear beneath ground. So I would call that a pretty much decisive victory as far as the message we're sending to Hamas, that there is a serious price to pay when you attack Israel. As far as what we're doing this morning, the IDF is indeed redeploying in specific areas within the Gaza Strip, enabling some of the civilians to come back to their houses, to their locations. We are redeploying in a way that will enable us both to initiate activities, to continue our defensive activities against tunnels, and indeed rapid reaction if required, if attacked. The idea, of course, is the Air Force will continue to operate. The reality that is developing now on the ground is one where there are new game rules as far as Gaza is concerned, and much to, I would say, the blame of Hamas and the way they decided to carry out this aggression against Israel.
But Peter, of course, and I'm going to use Tal's words of a decisive victory, the question is, can the IDF secure now or tell the Israeli citizens along the Gaza Strip communities that the IDF has achieved a victory in such that they can return to their communities in the south of Israel? We're hearing, of course, just now there's another red alert in the Eshkol Regional Council.
When we went into this battle, there was no doubt in our minds, and I've said it several times on I-24, that we expect them to have and at least maintain the ability to continue to launch rockets. And indeed, they still have about 3,000 rockets. It's about a third of what they had when they began. So while we have depleted that capability, it remains on the table. And they made sure that they have those capabilities in order to say, we're still holding Israel hostage and we still have the capability to launch rockets. I think we need to put that in perspective, though, and the context where they've shot 3,500 or so rockets at Israel. Most of them have fallen in open areas. Those that were supposed to land, 90% of those have been intercepted by the Iron Dome. So ultimately, even that as the second strategic arm that was meant to work in concert with the tunnels, even that has proved pretty much irrelevant and unsuccessful. So even if they do have rocket capabilities, and that was something we have voiced, and we're certain that they would have at the end of this ordeal, they're not successful. They have not been successful. I think, when I was both in the south yesterday and in the Tel Aviv area, and when you walk around and you see that the majority of Israel is continuing its life as normal, and if they have a disruption for 10 minutes in the middle of a day because of an alarm, it's inconvenient, but the reality is that people are going on with their day-to-day tasks and chores, and people are going to work, and that's just the way things are. This is what the IDF is currently doing, and indeed the situation where the tunnels now are almost completely demolished, where our forces have the ability to strike on the land, in the air, and at sea. And that the rules of our engagement with Hamas are determined by what we need and what we feel is required. I think that leaves us in the upper hand in any case at the end of this stage of the operation. And indeed, we are moving into the next.
And Peter, just one last question there. Yesterday, during the press conference between the defense minister and the prime minister, they did talk about some kind of measures that will be put in place along the home front in order to defensive measures, of course. Has the IDF home front started planning on the day after the operation when troops will be out of the Gaza Strip and how to defend these communities? Are there going to be new plans in place?
Well, I think when I was listening to both the defense minister and the prime minister, and I don't intend to be the person that tries and makes sense of and describes and interprets what they're saying, but what I heard is that Israel will be operating in order to have all of the technology put together with the great minds, I think was what the prime minister said. The remarkable minds of the Israeli capabilities in order to find and have solutions for the different threats that we are facing.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, the IDF spokesperson, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Amir, some things interesting that the IDF spokesman said this morning, and I do want your analysis in general of this morning, but to say now that the rockets are going to be an inconvenience is obviously giving a different narrative than what we started with in the beginning of the war, which, of course, this was a big threat to the citizens.
Well, most of the remarkable minds that Peter has spoken about have apparently gone into the spokesmanship business. Of course, one could never blame a military spokesman for dealing in double talk, but the messages are somewhat contradictory. One, we have never said that we are going to achieve a decisive victory. We only have modest goals. And two, we did achieve a decisive victory. So we will see. In the meantime, what the Israeli government and military are doing is crawling through the time tunnel back some 2.5 weeks. They are turning back the pages of the calendar to July 17th, before the ground phase of the operation. What they are saying is the ground phase is over because the tunnels have been demolished. The troops are going to be redeployed. As for the air war against the rockets, this will continue if the will of the Hamas, not only the capability, has not been degraded enough. So it's very comforting to hear the military spokesman say that this is the new normal, that it's hot in summer, there's traffic congestion, and once in a while there are alerts,
right.
and you go about your business.
10-minute inconvenience.
And yes, right. This might be the new slogan for the tourism ministry.
But Ali, another thing that the IDF spokesperson said was that the Hamas, and he answered, he was following up on Tal's comments, that the Hamas will come up and see on the ground the destruction and so forth of what they've built, and that a considerable amount of destruction has been done also to their infrastructure, but also, of course, to their military power. What are you hearing from Hamas? Is that even something that they're thinking about and talking about?
They are talking about, of course, Yael, but we should separate between Hamas, the political level, that is the one to face the Palestinian population, to answer the question about the massive destructions that took place in the Gaza Strip, and the military wing of Hamas that had another system of calculations and that is less hearing the population needs and demands. On the ground, the Hamas is capable, according to its military wing, to continue this battle for a couple of weeks or 3-4 weeks. And the political level wants a ceasefire. Since yesterday, also the military wing seeks for a ceasefire. And the question is, Yael, today the Palestinian delegation will start talking with the Egyptians in Cairo. There is no Gaza delegation in Cairo, and we need to see how the fact that Gaza is absent from the talks in Cairo will have an impact over the Hamas decision, over the Hamas position. But on the ground, the military wing is not, for the moment, it is not that they are indifferent, but it's not taking into calculation the massive destruction that the military spokesperson mentioned. They have another system of calculations, and paradoxically, to what the spokesperson presented, the more Hamas is in a crisis, the more tough will be the position of Hamas delegation in Cairo, and we need to see between those two points what would be the united position of the Palestinian factions, of the Palestinian delegation in Cairo,
and what will be said. Let's just take a quick look. Yesterday, of course, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did speak to the Israeli public and also answered questions from the press. Let's take a look.
At this hour, our forces are completing the disabling and destruction of the tunnels, the Gaza terror tunnels. So far, they have eliminated dozens of tunnels. This operation hurts a strategic array in which Hamas put a huge effort for years. In the beginning of the operation, we promised to return calm to the citizens of Israel. We will continue to pursue this cause until it is reached, no matter how long it will take and how much force will be needed. I would like to clarify, we have nothing against Gazan civilians who are not involved with terror. On the contrary, we are sorry for every civilian who is hit by mistake. We are recruiting the international community to support this goal of linking the rebuilding and developing of Gaza to its demilitarization. But even more important, it may surprise many people, but we are not surprised. The unique connection created between us and regional countries, that is a very important asset to the State of Israel. When the fighting ends, this will open new possibilities for us. There are people in the world who understand exactly who Hamas are, the same group that, together with Qatar, promised to the United States Secretary of State John Kerry and the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon a ceasefire and deceived them. I welcome U.S. President Barack Obama's and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's clear statement blaming Hamas for breaking the ceasefire, and I welcome Obama's statement that Israel has a right to defend itself against rocket fire and terror tunnels.
So, Tal, of course, there's a lot of messages in this statement by the Prime Minister. Let's also start also with what he's telling the Israeli public, what we started with. He's not, of course, saying that there's going to be an expansion, but he's also not saying that yet we're leaving unilaterally, although this is what a lot of analysts have been hinting at, because they're not really going to Cairo today, are they?
Well, they're not only hinting. The briefings yesterday from Israeli officials were clear that the cabinet has decided to unilaterally withdraw gradually, as we said, from the Gaza Strip. And this is an idea that has been in the workings since the beginning of the ground operation. It's not a new idea, and some analysts may ask, why wasn't it deployed up until now? Why wasn't this idea implemented up until now? But we might say it was a very tough cabinet meeting on Friday evening. The ministers come when the public is astonished at another ceasefire that went away after 4 hours,
right.
And growing calls inside the Israeli political system, inside the government, to expand the operation, to crush Hamas, to redefine these strategic goals. And the cabinet did decide not to redefine the strategic goals, to keep the goals very modest. And we've been talking about it a lot in the past few weeks, how Netanyahu and Ya'alon have been leading this very restrained approach. I think, again, this is a demonstration of them being very responsible in many ways, and not listening to what the public is calling, because it's true. Maybe Lieutenant General Peter Lerner didn't like my phrasing of a crushing victory, but it's true. When you hear today the voices also inside the cabinet, inside the government, but on the street, many of the Israeli public do not feel that that something big has been achieved here, and they are afraid that if we're leaving unilaterally, in the end, in another year or a year and a half, Netanyahu has to find some solution that in another year or a year and a half, this will not be another rerun of this whole scenario. And so Netanyahu is presenting the equation of linking reconstruction of Gaza with demilitarization of Gaza. That's a very, I think that's a good equation on the paper. I'm not sure how much, given the grave humanitarian situation in Gaza, which was one of the reasons the Israeli cabinet did decide to start to conclude the operation. I'm not sure, given the grave humanitarian situation, it'll be able to really link the reconstruction of Gaza with disarmament of Gaza.
But Ali, is Hamas looking at this decision now to unilaterally withdraw as a weakness or a strength of Israel? Meaning they obviously are now using the fact that Israel won't come towards a ceasefire, not going to come to Cairo for their own PR. But ultimately, are they going to look at this and say Netanyahu is going to, have to explain it to his own people in a year and a half when this happens again?
Yeah, of course, that's what they are saying. But between what they are saying publicly and between what they are seeing on the ground and the needs of the Palestinian population for a ceasefire, Yael, we have 200,000 Palestinians displaced in 90 UNRWA compounds and schools, and pressure and tension is coming from there, and the Hamas need to deliver something in order to ease the suffering of the Palestinian population. It is true that the spokesperson of Hamas are describing the Israeli decision as a weakness, as running away from the Gaza Strip, running away from the confrontation, not getting deep into the Gaza Strip, although we saw that in Rafah, the Israeli troops went out of the perimeter that they were at the beginning and went into deep in the city of Rafah. But Hamas, the Israeli decision seems to be giving Hamas a chair to go down from the tree and to start talking politics. Now on the table in Cairo, Hamas understand that there is another political battle, this equation of the reconstruction of Gaza, and on the other hand, the militarization of Gaza. What would be the reaction of Hamas? And when we say Hamas, we say different trends, different opinion, different international sponsor, Iran, Qatar, and other. So Hamas knows that this morning will start its political battle. According to them, they stand well in the military battle. They face the Israeli army. In the terminology of Hamas, we pass from the resistance to the confrontation stage, and now they have to confront this equation of the militarization for the reconstruction, which means that the international community and parts of the Palestinian Authority is putting Hamas as an obstacle in front of the reconstruction. The equation is the same in Lebanon. The weapons of Hezbollah versus reconstruction and unity of the political forces in Lebanon, and the same here. Hamas understand that the first shot in the campaign of the getting out the Hamas weapons from the Palestinian consensus started, and this is a new phase that the Islamic movement need to face since 1987.
Amir?
A few points, if I may. Rafah is a special case because it has Egypt as its southern or left wing, left if you look from Israel towards the sea. So Israel has to be very careful not to impinge on Egyptian sensitivities when it operates in Gaza, or else it has to coordinate with Egypt whatever is done there. But it really had no choice, because as long as the fate of Lieutenant Goldin was not known, it had to do everything it could in order to go there. Now, regarding the body count, this Vietnam War term, which turns up once and again in wars. In this round of violence, there have been 25 Palestinians killed for every Israeli. However, even that ratio is only 1% of those killed in the Syrian civil war. So the world is war-weary. The numbers of casualties do not mean much anymore. As for the destruction and reconstruction, including the reestablishment of the Hamas military power, Israel has learned a bitter lesson after its most decisive victory, indeed a decisive victory, in 1967, when it crushed the Egyptian armed forces and others. It believed that it will take many years for them to be reconstituted. It took exactly 1 year for the Soviet Union to resupply Egypt, and here Iran is resupplying Hamas. The Israeli soldiers have already encountered new items that Iran supplied when they found the equipment in the tunnels. They were surprised to see brand new, newly minted Iranian items. So Israel should wait and see before it declares that it has deterrence and that it will take years for Hamas to get back on its feet.
And another, of course, part of that equation with Iran, and also going back to the press conference yesterday, was that Netanyahu did speak of a regional kind of unity, something that perhaps we haven't heard quite for a while from his office and from this government praising this regional unity. And this, of course, comes on the heels of Cairo and on the heels of Sisi.
Well, it's, to be correct, in the past year, I think, or maybe as long since Netanyahu has been launching his campaign against the Iranian nuclear bomb, this a regional alliance of the moderate Arab countries and Israel has been one of his talking points, and there is an under the radar cooperation between Israel and moderate Arab countries.
Also Sunnis versus Shiites, mostly.
Yes, the Sunni countries, yeah. But in any case, this operation has first boosted the cooperation between Israel and Egypt to a situation we haven't seen in a long time, and B, it has created some kind of alliance. But what Netanyahu is not addressing is the fact that if he wants this alliance to really create new opportunities, it will entail from Israel some kind of big gesture towards the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas. This alliance will not just stand by Israel. These are not people that are standing by Israel. It's shared interests, and one of the shared interests of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan with Israel is, or their shared interest is that Mahmoud Abbas will be boosted and be strengthened from this situation. It's not
something
clear.
That he didn't say yesterday, of course.
He didn't say that, of course, and it's not clear that inside the Israeli government. I mean, maybe Netanyahu is understanding that there should be a change of tones toward Abbas, but it's not clear that inside the Israeli cabinet this is the situation. Yesterday, the head of the coalition, Yariv Levin, was on Channel 2 blaming Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that he wants to destroy Israel exactly like Hamas. This is not the situation, and this is not, but this is the situation that many in the cabinet think.
Yeah, the absence of an Israeli delegation from the Cairo talks has to do with symbolism rather than with substance. With modern communications, it doesn't really matter whether the Israelis are there or on the other side of the phone in Jerusalem, but it denies Hamas the veto power over the talks or the gesture of breaking down the talks and leaving Cairo and again putting Israel in the position of having been stuck with that unpredictable partner.
The fact that Israel's not even showing up isn't enough of a statement in itself.
It doesn't have to show up because Yitzhak Molcho, Netanyahu's advisor, and the head of the security service, and Amos Gilad from the defense ministry are always talking to their counterparts. And if there are negotiating positions which have to be amended, Israel can do it, and then someone can fly to Cairo in a short hour in order to sign the aid memoir.
The Egyptian president, Sisi, yesterday spoke, and let's take a quick look at what he said.
I want to say that the initiative stands and is able to resolve the issue. Efforts do not just begin during the period of this crisis. No, Egyptian efforts began a long time ago, but some things are announced and others are not. We are still continuing these efforts with everyone, with all sides. I want to say again that the core of the Egyptian initiative allows for no obstacles against a real end to Palestinian bloodshed and the violence that we're seeing now, day after day. We proposed it, the initiative, before the ground assault, when the number of dead could not be compared to what we have now. And the destruction we're talking about now is not what it was before. I do not want to talk about the past, but I want to say that the initiative is able to resolve the issue in a very good way. Why? Because it opens the doors, without constraints, towards reaching a truce, the entry of aid, followed by all other issues. It's as simple as that. There are no other alternatives.
Obviously, of course, Sisi has been relatively focal in this last conflict, but he's using now the stage also to strengthen his own popularity, not only within Egypt, but also within the region.
Yeah, of course. If there were a doubt about the place of Egypt in the equation, Sisi made it clear that Egypt is there. Egypt is an integral part of this of the solution. Well, Hamas considered that the regime is part of the problem, but the most important thing that General Sisi said, or President Sisi said, that first ceasefire, then humanitarian aids, and only afterwards we can talk about all the arrangements, about the security arrangement, which in our words is the lifting of the blockade.
So it will be a Sisi fire rather than a ceasefire.
It will be a Sisi fire. Now, Sisi expect from Israel to deal with Abu Mazen in order to continue this alliance, this shared interest between Israel and between Marshal Sisi. Israel need to talk, need to consider Abu Mazen. This is one thing. The second thing is Prime Minister mentioned the shared interest or the alliance between other countries in the world. If there is no sustainable, serious political process, this alliance between Israel and Saudi mainly will disappear as it appeared. This is a thing. And the third thing is the Palestinians are expecting that after the partial elections in the United States in November, a serious new initiative of the American to relaunch the peace process should be going out.
And of course, we'll be following that in the next half hour as well. We're going to take a quick break here at I-24 News and Morning Edition. We'll be back very soon with more of the special broadcast. On your screens now, you see live pictures, of course, from Tel Aviv and the Gaza Strip. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back to I-24 News Morning Edition special broadcast. Of course, this morning it's day 27 of Operation Protective Edge. Ali, we are going to continue with you. Of course, we're talking about these Cairo talks that Israel is deemed not reliable and is not going to go and talk about a ceasefire. Meanwhile, who is there? We know, of course, there's a big differentiation between the political and military wing of Hamas. Who is now in Cairo and who's going to be leading these talks?
Symbolically, Yael, this is the first time ever that there is a united Palestinian delegation that includes the secular nationalist factions with the Islamic factions, all the Palestinian factions. that participated in this confrontation will be represented in the delegation. There will be the Deputy Secretary General of the Islamic Jihad coming from Beirut, Ziad Nakhala. There will be a representative coming from Damascus, a representative of the PFLP that also slightly participated in the shootings. The number 2 of the organization will be in the delegation, and of course 3 main leaders of Hamas coming from Doha, Qatar to Cairo, but the delegation will include also members of the Palestinian of the PLO, members of the DFLP and of the Communist Party, and the delegation will be led and headed by Azam al-Ahmad, the special envoy of President Abbas. And of course today they will start talking between themselves. The Palestinian delegation need to coordinate their positions.
Because many of them are coming with different ideologies on how, or perspectives on how to end this conflict, and of course they're also going to be polling it for their own political capital as well.
Yeah, of course, but the fact that they accepted, that Hamas and the Islamic Jihad would accept that a Fatah member, the representative will lead, this is already a message. And actually they didn't have a choice. The Egyptians wouldn't accept that the Palestinian delegation would be led by Hamas. At the beginning, they refused that Hamas would be part even of the delegation. But in the first hours, the Palestinian delegation will try to coordinate its own position, then addressing to the Egyptians, and only then presenting a paper or talking directly or indirectly to an Israeli delegation that might or not come to Egypt. But it is true, we have different groups among the Palestinian delegation, and the most important in this delegation is those who are not in the delegation, and those who are not in the delegation are Hamas from Gaza, Hamas who is close to the military wing, Hamas who should have come from the tunnels. The Hamas delegation said that they didn't receive any international guarantees for their safety. This is why they are not joining the delegation. So there is...
But they still most likely will accept any kind of conclusion that this delegation makes.
Yeah, we have already a very close lesson from Friday morning when the military wing judged that it was not taken into consideration when Mashal gave his word to the Americans and to the UN that Hamas will respect a ceasefire. But more likely this time the military wing would accept any arrangement that will include even a first mentioning of political measures that will end with the lifting of the blockade. For the moment, the Palestinian delegation made it clear that they will accept the arrangements, that they will go for a ceasefire if at the second stage there will be talks about the lifting of the blockade.
We're going to go get a quick reaction now from the member of Knesset, Nachman Shai, from the Labour Party. Member of Knesset Shai, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
So, of course, we did hear, all of us, and we've been analyzing the Prime Minister's words last night. There is not an expansion, but we're still continuing in the Gaza Strip until we'll unilaterally withdraw. What does this mean, of course, about the political solution afterwards? Up until now, the opposition has been very supportive of the government. Is this going to keep and continue?
We are supportive as long as we believe that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are doing the right thing. I mean, if they don't do the right thing, we are not going to follow them. For the time being, it seems that they managed to run this operation in a wise way and wisely, and we appreciate that and we support them. But I think that our ways will split if after this mini war, the government would not move towards a political solution between us and the Palestinians. There's no doubt, especially now, that we need to use this way in order to reach a certain long-time agreement between us and the Palestinians. Otherwise, we'll have to continue this path of wars and mini wars and a war of attrition and so on and so forth. And this is not the kind of a dialogue that I believe we should conduct with our neighbors.
Member of Knesset Shai, we have some questions from the studio. Here's Amir Oren of Haaretz.
Good morning, member of Knesset Shai. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Oren. How are you today?
Good. You have written a book on the media and Israel's diplomatic and military campaigns. And there is one angle which may distinguish Israel because it is such a close-knit and relatively small society. The military censor has just permitted the Israeli press to report that there is some family relations between Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon and the and Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who was confirmed killed in Gaza.
Right.
Of course, there were rumors about it for the last 2 days. How, in your experience, and you have worked with defense ministers Ahrens and Rabin and Chief of Staff Barak and others, how do such personal considerations come into play when decision makers in Israel have to decide on war and peace?
This is unprecedented. I don't believe that in the past we confronted a situation like this. But let me tell you something, Amir, which we all know. The secret that the military censor has been kept so closely, close to his heart, maybe, her heart, it was well known since Friday morning. It was well known within, I believe, hundreds of thousands of Israelis who are sharing all the information between themselves on social networks. And it's time for the military censor to wake up and understand that the reality has changed. The fact that you, as a journalist, is now allowed to use this relationship between Defense Minister Ya'alon and the family of Hadar Goldin was a fact, well-known fact, 48 hours ago. That should be another consideration in how we conduct the war of information and on information. Information is no longer conducted by or handled by the IDF or any other governmental vector here. There are other players, and they have information, and they share it between themselves, and they destabilize this long-time control on the media and on information.
We have a quick another question from our I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, Tal Shalev.
Mr. Shai, good morning. I'd like to return to the political level, to the political question. If some kind of long-term solution would entail the Israeli government to renew relations with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, that might not be accepted on many inside the Israeli government. Would Labor consider joining the government to promote at this point, to promote some kind of understanding with the Palestinian Authority?
They don't need us in the government. They don't need us. We will support it from the opposition. Joining the coalition is a different question, because that means that we're going to be partners on the entire policy of this coalition on other matters, including economic ones and so on and so forth, that I don't believe we share the same view with the present government. And we are not there anyhow. But the Prime Minister can rely on us that in any in the next I wouldn't commit ourselves, but as far as I can see now, as long as he proceeds on the same reasonable way of running this campaign, plus renewed negotiation with the Palestinians, otherwise we are not partners there at all, we will support him. If the day comes that he needs us for the coalition, that will be a total different ballgame, and we'll have to negotiate about it. But that's really not something I can see right now.
Member of Knesset Nachman Shai of the Labour Party, thank you for joining us this morning. Obviously, Tal, we look at the political aspects of this. It's going to get maybe louder and more, I would say, dramatic than it has been. It has been very subdued in the past subdued for the Israeli public. People that don't have an inside ear to what's going on in the Security Cabinet thought that also from the public and also from the government, there's an overwhelming support. We're seeing today, this morning, ministers on the right, members of Knesset on the right saying, we need to stay in Gaza.
Well, these ministers from the right have been voicing their objections throughout throughout the whole operation. If we're talking about ministers from the Jewish Home, if we're talking about ministers from the Likud, and if we're talking about ministers from Israel Beitenu, the cabinet ministers did kind of scale down their critics at some point, meaning Naftali Bennett and Avigdor Lieberman. You didn't hear them so loud. But Netanyahu did have a problem with his ministers. On Thursday, he had a government meeting in which he actually scolded the outspoken ministers for criticizing him at times of wars. But definitely the countdown, as the operation is reaching its conclusion, the political countdown is on. Netanyahu has many contenders who are trying to bypass him from the right. And yes, the right-wing parts of the political system are not happy with the solution. They have been calling for a much more tougher approach towards Gaza.
But does this mean, of course, that Netanyahu is in a lose-lose situation? Ultimately, when we do take out our troops from the Gaza Strip, there will be those in the right that said you didn't really do anything, and there will be those maybe in the left that says we also didn't have to go into Gaza to achieve what you've done.
I think when you look at the approval ratings, yesterday there was a poll on Channel 10 regarding the approval ratings. The most popular figure, of course, was the IDF Chief of Staff, Benny Gantz, getting 8 out of 10 points. But after that, Netanyahu was with 6.9 and Yalon was with 6.8. In the general public, I do think that Netanyahu has bolstered his image as a very responsible and restrained leader. But inside the right-wing part of his, and maybe his electoral base, he could have lost points, probably lost some points. But I think that Netanyahu knew that these points were lost to begin with.
And meaning it was a lost cause to begin with, and trying a lost war to begin with. Let's go to our I-24 news correspondent, Danny Swibel. Danny, you're in the Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon.
Yes, good evening, good morning, actually, Yael. It's been a relatively quiet morning here in the south in Ashkelon. Astonishingly, no soldiers were brought in this morning. And this is quite a stark difference from earlier, yesterday, where 16 soldiers were brought in. As it stands, 32 soldiers are here recovering from their wounds. One is still considered in quite serious condition. 6 are reportedly to be in stable condition. And the rest, we heard from the medical staff, are doing really well, and they're recovering very nicely. As it stands, 1,125 soldiers and civilians since the beginning of the operation have been here, with 4 soldiers succumbing to their wounds. The community in the south have come here in droves, bringing food and gifts and support for the people who are recovering here, and they hope it stays quiet. Again, it's been a very quiet morning here, and the residents down south hope it stays that way.
Danny Swibel there in Ashkelon in the Barzilai Hospital. Thank you for that update. We will just now update our viewers that there is a code red siren in the Sha'ar Negev Regional Council just right now. Amir, of course, taking back up onto what Tal said, and of course the statement now by the IDF censor saying that Goldin was a relative of the defense minister. It's mixing, of course, and this is throughout Israeli military history, the emotions of it all, of course, with military objectives and ultimately political calculations.
Yes, and this is why Tal is so correct regarding the political fallout from this crisis, but difficult as it is to judge, because we are still, at least in the last stages of the ground operation here, Netanyahu will be judged by the next crisis, not by this one. And
which could be on the heels of this one.
It could be on the heels of this one. It could be a security or military one, but it will probably be a diplomatic one, because all U.S. administrations over the last 40 years or so have stuck to one rule. Following a ceasefire, you come out with some political plan. This political plan must be, quote-unquote, even-handed in order for Israel's Arab partners to see any merit to it. This will mean that the government in being in Jerusalem will not like it. So Netanyahu is going to be pushed into a renewed process with Mahmoud Abbas, who is part of this regional alliance of moderates that you talked about. And Netanyahu will find himself confronting his critics from the right, who will tell him that this is too heavy a price to pay. And this
perhaps
is
also from the left, who will say you didn't really achieve security for the South.
Well, the left is not, even though some of the kibbutzim are considered part of the left of center movement, this is not a right or left question regarding security for the South. But the left will have to decide whether it supports Netanyahu peace-wise, even though it is disappointed in what he achieved security-wise.
Ali, take us through the Hamas, perhaps a process of events and thinking since Friday morning, the ceasefire. Of course, Hadar Goldin and then taking upon the part that Israel looks upon every kidnapped soldier and puts the emotions and mixes perhaps the emotions with the strategy at some times. Hamas from the beginning denied that they even had a soldier, and they denied that they were the ones that broke the ceasefire. How did it play out until this morning, actually?
Because Hamas understood the consequence of both on the military level, on the diplomatic level, how it would impact, and it impacted on the place, on the spot. The Egyptians asked the Palestinian delegations not to come from Gaza, not to come to Egypt, which means that in the internal calculations of Hamas, only the foreign part of Hamas will be assisting these talks, and that the Gaza delegation won't be assisting. This is one thing. The second, they understood that they might call Israel for a harder line operation in Gaza, and we saw Rafah, what happened in Rafah, and made the Hamas understand that the reaction of the Palestinian population will be so hard and so tough vis-a-vis Hamas. The foreign reporters in the Gaza Strip said that for the first time they heard people blaming and accusing Hamas for this non-respect of the ceasefire, which is a precedent almost in this confrontation. And Hamas understood that there will be a political price to pay both in the internal level and in the external level. And it is true that Hamas is a resistance movement. It is true that Hamas is a military wing, but Hamas is also a movement that wants to live politically. And
but did they think ever, or during the past 48 hours, to use the disappearance or the kidnapping of Golden until he was pronounced dead, of course, by the IDF, as some kind of leverage against the Israelis?
Yeah, of
course. They have used in the past?
They understood that this soldier fall in a military confrontation. It was not kidnapped like Gilad Shalit, and that in the Israeli public opinion there was already a mood before even this confrontation that the price that was paid in the Shalit deal should not be paid. This is why Hamas, from the beginning, tried to reduce the expectations of the Palestinian population. First, in saying that we don't have the soldier, and second, they understood that there won't be such a big deal, and third, that the price that they will pay immediately would be much heavier.
If I may add, I think that the days of any negotiations for captured soldiers seem to be over. When you hear the Israeli public after the Shalit deal, this was a very traumatic deal, and this there was supposed to be a very it always brings up a very intense debate, and you could see the way the Israeli public was reacting. It is true that yesterday, outside of Hadar Goldin's family's house, there were dozens, maybe hundreds of people praying and calling for his release and calling not to continue and not to stop the operation until he is back in Israel. But you do understand that in the Israeli public, this equation of negotiating with terrorists and releasing Palestinian prisoners for an Israeli soldier, it's changed.
And the siege over Gaza was strengthened after the Shalit kidnapping, and when the talks in Cairo aim to end, or one of the goals of these talks is to end the siege over Gaza with an Israeli soldier, the Gazans knew that it would be harder to reach an agreement about the lifting of the blockade. And
Chemi Golden, the brother of the second lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who was, of course, now has been pronounced dead by the IDF, spoke to I-24 News last night. Let's take a look.
I'm speaking on behalf of my family and on behalf of my brother, whose voice cannot be heard because no one is telling us any information about what's going on with him. Is he injured? Does he need any medical care? Does he need any care whatsoever? We do not know. We have no response. We have no information from the international society, and we have nothing to hold on to.
You're saying that you don't have any information from the international community, and you don't have any information from the IDF as well. Nobody from the IDF explained to you what is the current situation, or if they know anything about Hadar?
At this moment, we know that Hadar, my brother, who's 23, who just got engaged, and he's due to be married soon. We were in the middle of the preparation for his wedding. You can see his paintings here. All we know that while that happened, from the IDF, they say nothing. All we know is that he's been kidnapped by a terrorist organization, and no one is doing anything to negotiate or try to give him any rights, any medical care, any care whatsoever.
Amir, you do see pictures of this, and it completely, I mean, as a citizen also, although we're used to it, if we have to say it, it of course hits us every time, and it does, of course, set a precedent within population, public opinion about the next operation, because it's going to be inevitable.
Yes, but regarding missing in action,
right.
Such as Lieutenant Goldin, until he was pronounced killed in action, the irony is that earlier Hamas and other Palestinian organizations were looked upon as almost criminal gangs, which abduct people for ransom. The fighting performance of Hamas over the last 2 weeks got relatively high marks from the Israelis. In certain cases, they were bold. They attacked the IDF in the rear. And therefore, because they are now virtually an army, it is acceptable to become a prisoner of war in battle, even though they do not subscribe to the Geneva Convention. But it is not the same. Being a POW, a prisoner of war in battle, is not the same as being on guard and all of a sudden someone sneaking behind you and abducting you.
Ali, when looking at Friday's events and up until now, is Hamas still standing by the story that Israel was the one that broke the ceasefire? And is that going to be impacting at all its international standing? We're hearing now that the Emir of Qatar is condemning the UN for even condemning Hamas for them being the ones to break the ceasefire.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Well, the international community, the UN, the United States adopted the Israeli narrative that it was taking place after
Some will say maybe for the first time during this operation, they both had really supported the Israeli narrative of events.
Yeah, but Hamas made the decision to attack, and they are now paying the price, and the support of Qatar will not change. On the contrary, Hamas understands that the impact, because of this firm position of the international community, especially of the United States and of Egypt, Hamas is going to pay a price of this kidnapping. The fact that this cell that made the attack didn't stand the attempt to the temptation to have an Israeli soldier will have a political price, and we are already seeing the political price. The Gaza delegation is not in the negotiations. Apparently, Hamas will be obliged to accept the Egyptian equation that we will talk first ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and then only we are going to talk the lifting of the blockade, when we are not sure who will be there to have the credit for the lifting of the blockade, whether it would be the Palestinian Authority alone or in a shared government with Hamas, or even without Hamas. In this case, Hamas will be getting to its sources as a resistance jihadi movement that need to react to the political
situation on the ground.
Yeah. One of Netanyahu's, if I may say, wisest ways of actions was to accept any international initiative that was put on the table immediately.
Right.
This basically,
which is seen as a weakness on some parts of Israeli society.
Of course, but from international legitimacy point of view, this was a very wise way to go. This definitely boosted the international legitimacy, and it helped Israel build the case in front of the international institutions. Will this last? No. This credit is quite limited. It could change every moment, but at the moment, Israel did succeed, and I think definitely compared to Operation Pillar of Defense, the support of the international community for Israel has been overwhelming. There has been criticism, there have been calls, mounting pressure to stop the fighting because of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, but nevertheless, Israel did succeed to convince leading players in the international community that Israel is the one that is trying to abide by the rules, and Hamas is the one that is definitely violating them again and again.
Yeah, from my angle, the most interesting thing is to look and expect what would be the road that Hamas will choose for its future. Whether to be integrated in the Palestinian Authority, in this camp of the pragmatic, I don't want to say moderate, but pragmatic camp, and accept that it should be part of the reconstructions of of Gaza, or whether it would obey the Iranian hints that we are ready to rearm you and to even to rearm the West Bank. By the way, the Palestinian Authority, when they heard Khamenei talking about rearming the West Bank, understood that something went on already, and that via Hezbollah, the Iranian will try once again to rearm the West Bank. By the way, after the 2002 operation in the West Bank, most of the suicide bombing attacks and the attacks that took place in the West Bank were financed, orchestrated by a Hezbollah section that was responsible for the West Bank.
And quickly, we do need to go off, but Ali brings up the other factions and the other borders, and we're hearing also from the IDF military command that these are other borders that are going to be looked at now because of what happened in the Gaza Strip. Is there any information or any kind of a plan on the table to look into the northern border now of Israel due to what happened?
No, not necessarily, but the IDF has invested over the last 2 months most of its regular infantry brigades and some artillery and armor units, first in the West Bank in looking for the 3 kidnapped and then murdered youth, and then in the Gaza Strip. It cannot be overly invested in one particular front. It must go back to guarding the north. So this is one more reason for redeploying out of Gaza.
But also in terms of the security threats now facing Israel, is there a new assessment after Protective Edge, or did Protective Edge actually just show us more of the same that we knew?
There is no assessment, there is no information. Perhaps Daesh is getting stronger in Syria. It has not been getting stronger in Iraq, by the way, over the last month. It has been stabilized there. But military planners have to be prudent and not pull all of their eggs in the Gaza basket.
I want to thank all of my panel members this morning. We're going to take a quick break for the I-24 News Desk headlines, and we'll be back with another hour of I-24 News Morning Edition. These are live pictures, of course, from the Gaza Strip and Tel Aviv. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us here at I-24 News Morning Edition. This is a special broadcast this morning. It is Sunday, August 3rd, 2014, the 27th day of Operation Protective Edge. Late last night, the IDF confirmed that the Givati Brigade officer Hadar Goldin, who according to initial assessments had been captured in Gaza on Friday morning in a Hamas attack, had been killed. Earlier, the family of Hadar Goldin held an emotional press conference imploring the government not to leave their son behind in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister had announced earlier yesterday that the IDF will soon redeploy its troops when the work of demolishing Hamas tunnels is done, but that, quote, all options are open for now on how the operation continues from here. Some troops have already pulled out of Gaza, having completed their specific missions. The deaths in Friday's attack in Rafiah brought the IDF toll to 64. 3 civilians have also been killed on the Israeli side. The Gazan health officials have put the death toll there at some 1,700. This morning, rocket sirens sounded throughout the southern region of Israel. Recently, just a few minutes ago, there was one in the Sha'ar Negev Regional Council. With me this morning is Senior Counsel of Heidemann, Nudelman and Kali, Attorney Richard Heidemann. Thank you, Attorney Heidemann, for being with us. Intelligence and security expert Yossi Melman. Thank you for being with us. And Arad Nir, the Foreign Affairs Editor for Channel 2. Yossi, I want to start with you. Of course, we're looking at Netanyahu's statements yesterday, and of course what's happening now on the ground within the Gaza Strip. It's going to be a unilateral withdrawal, but the question is when and what will be achieved by that withdrawal?
It is a unilateral political decision. It's a unilateral military move, and the pullout has begun. Israel is already sending back forces, and
but the Israeli Air Force is still operating.
Yeah, but ground forces are already moving back. The ground forces have established already from the day 2 of the operation a security zone. I think I said it time and again here, and I would say it once again. There is a buffer zone, a security zone, wide between 1 to 3 kilometers. Now the goal of this security buffer zone is double. First of all, it is to secure the communities, the rural communities around the Gaza border, especially when the border fence has been damaged, severely damaged because of the military operations and because the Israeli forces have moved in and out through the fence. And secondly, it has a political strategic importance. It's a bargaining chip.
Right.
Israel would withdraw in return for some sort of an arrangement with vis-a-vis Egypt and Hamas. So the only difference is between Friday morning and Sunday is that Israel opted to have a ceasefire mutually agreed upon with Hamas, and now we have some sort of a ceasefire unilaterally decided by the two sides.
So that might not change things in the field, but it may change it also internationally. I want to quickly just first get an update from Mirav Savir, I-24 news correspondent there on the Israeli-Gaza border this morning. Mirav, what's the latest from there?
Yeah, from what we're seeing where we are towards the center south of the Gaza Strip, we're actually seeing activity in both the south and farther towards the north. In the past couple of minutes, we were able to see mushroom clouds coming from both locations. We're waiting here exactly where that took place and what it is that it was. But over on the Israeli side already this morning, several alarms have gone off at the Chof Ashkelon Regional Council and the Sha'ar HaNegev Regional Council. Farther north of where we are, 2 interceptions over Chof Ashkelon earlier this morning, about 2 hours ago. We're waiting to hear about the rest, whether or not they fell in open areas or were intercepted. But where we are right now, we're continuing to see black smoke coming from several different areas within the Gaza Strip. Other than that, we're seeing a lot of sand being thrown around. That usually means that there's tanks or jeeps. Something is driving around within the right over the border of the Gaza Strip.
Mirav Savir, we are seeing, of course, live pictures there in back of you from the Gaza Strip as well. Thank you for that update. Arad, I want to take off where Yossi left off. It may not change what's happening on the ground militarily, but the fact that Israel is not coming to Cairo this morning, and the fact, of course, that Netanyahu is going to have to explain his position to the Israeli people is going to have some international implications.
Well, I think that for the first time since this whole thing started, Israel is taking the initiative. Up until now, Israel was dragged. Hamas took the initiative was on the Hamas side. Right. Israel asked for quiet, etc., etc. Hamas didn't respond, and Israel was dragged into these various levels of confrontation. Now, the title or the aim of Israel is deterrence. Israel is counting now on deterrence. Israel believes that Hamas will be deterred. And this remains to be seen now. Mm-hmm. This is the $1 million question, you know. Will Hamas be deterred now? I remind our viewers that Hamas started this whole escalation because they had a list of demands. They wanted to open the borders, they wanted to uplift the siege, they wanted a airport, they wanted harbor. They had a long list of demands. They offered 10 years of hudna, of ceasefire, right, for 10 various different demands. So they achieved nothing of all this. The question is, will they be deterred now from keeping on attacking Israel? Now, regarding the international community, again, I believe that there's a large support to the cause and to the case of Israel. The problem is the disproportionality of the damage that Hamas is causing Israel to the damage that Israel causes Gaza, not Hamas,
right,
Gaza.
The civilians.
And this is very difficult for the world to perceive, and this is very difficult for the world to accept.
And it's not only difficult to the world to accept on the Gaza civilian side, but also on the Israeli civilian side. No one has told the Israeli civilians, now is the time to go home back to your southern communities. We've now have 27 days of war, and we've made a difference, a dent in Hamas's abilities. We're seeing, of course, rocket fire up until this morning, and I just want to add to that I spoke with the IDF spokesperson this morning, and he changed maybe his rhetoric in saying now it's going to be an inconvenience for Israelis, but this is what we can get.
Yes, you know, these are the limitations of power. the Israeli government, or the Israeli Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense, should I say, they are counting on deterrence. They hope that Hamas will not carry on. They may be wrong, and then they would have to think of a different solution. What they talk about at the moment would be a military airstrikes, not incursion, which is very good. On the other hand, I wish they would have come with a certain political plan that would put an horizon, a bright horizon, at least for the people of Gaza, definitely not for Hamas.
Yesterday, of course, Netanyahu and the defense minister spoke at a press conference mentioning a regional unity. Netanyahu mentioning, without giving any, of course, names, but it's quite obvious who he's referring to. But he didn't, of course, refer to the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, something that perhaps would have changed the international community's perception towards Netanyahu's goals.
Yeah, well, there were some question marks regarding the role he sees for Mahmoud Abbas, and I think that Hamas is back to the picture as far as Prime Minister Netanyahu is concerned. They want the PA, the Palestinian Authority, to take care of the movements in and out of the Gaza Strip, of the checkpoints, etc. I don't know if Hamas will accept it. I don't know if Mahmoud Abbas will accept it. Maybe it's time really to bring again to the table this unity government. I don't know. Netanyahu actually sits outside of the game. You know, he doesn't join the crowd. He waits for them to come up with a proposal again. And another interesting point vis-a-vis Netanyahu's statement and the regional players, he did not even mention Turkey once. Now, the Turks claim to have direct contacts with Hamas. They do have direct contact with Hamas. They also said on Friday, Foreign Minister Davutoglu said out loud that he'll do whatever he can to help, at the time, release the captured Israeli soldiers. They do deliver messages between the United States and Hamas. They said it. Kerry said it. Right. Obama said it. Apparently, Netanyahu ignores Turkey altogether, for better and for worse. I wonder what's the reason for it. I think he doesn't want to give Turkey the slightest of credit for anything before next week, when Erdogan will be put for election day. Right. He'll be on his election day, and he doesn't want to help at all, and he thinks that whatever he would say would help him, and he still hopes that maybe Erdogan will lose, and then it will change the atmosphere. As far as Erdogan is in the picture, I think that for Netanyahu, Turkey does not exist. And
we do also look at the international media for a lot of times, Richard, for indication of where political public opinion does stand globally. And in the last 48 hours, I would say, from the ceasefire, it was mainly a game of rhetoric. Who broke the ceasefire first, under what circumstances? And now that we're back to, as Yossi said, Friday morning is exactly like Sunday morning in terms of events. We're at the same place where we really were. What is the international media going to now look for, perhaps, or take on from this past event? Hadar Goldin has now been pronounced dead. He's not kidnapped. It's not something that's going to change the nature of the war. And we're basically back at square one.
The international media will continue to blame Israel for everything. That has been the game for the longest period of time. A total disregarding that the Palestine Liberation Organization is a terror organization. It has used terror. It has used threats. It has used activities both on the battlefield, in the air, hiding people behind human shields, shooting from hospitals, shooting from schools, violating international legal warfare norms.
But they're also going to probably look at the numbers that are rising. 1,700, the Gaza Health Ministry put it at as of late, and the pictures coming out. They're going to say, look, what has Netanyahu really achieved for the security of Israel? And how can it, of course, explain the 1,700 dead?
Every nation state in the world is entitled to defend itself. In fact, its primary obligation is to defend her people. And that's what Prime Minister Netanyahu and the state of Israel have done, is insist that notwithstanding the diplomatic activities that tried to keep Israel held down to a different standard, Israel has the right and the obligation to defend her people. When she was taken to the International Court of Justice at The Hague 10 years ago, the accusation was that the terrorism fence is an apartheid wall. It's an attempt by the international community to paint Israel as an apartheid, racist, criminal state. And the issue of diplomatic warfare, the issue of battlefield warfare, the issue of terror warfare has to also be viewed in the context of the past and the coming legal warfare against Israel.
But of course, now that the war is hopefully, or it's going to be dwindling down, hopefully in the next few days, maybe weeks, the legal implications are now going to be rising up. Does this mean that people such as yourself who have represented victims of terror, what kind of evidence are you going to be looking for, or taking tangible evidence that you can use in international courts or in federal courts in the United States?
In the federal courts in the United States, under the Anti-Terrorism Act, litigation is appropriate and is ongoing as it relates to sponsors of terror, people who fund, people who support, people who provide material support. That means organizations, it means foreign governments that are on the state sponsor, the list of state sponsors of terror, and it means others who provide the mechanism and the means and the incentives and the rewards to commit terror and murder.
Right.
But in the legal warfare context, we have to take a look again at the International Court of Justice advisory opinion of 10 years ago that totally disregarded Israel's respect for human rights and Israel's own High Court of Justice decision as it relates to the fence, concentrating on humanitarian issues. What we can expect now is an onslaught at an attempt to get at the International Criminal Court, and part of that is the plan of the PLO and the PA to bolster themselves in the international community, to say, well, we really are a state, recognize us as a state, give us status with the Rome Statute, let us bring a case. That all has a double-edged sword, because the fact of the matter is, if the International Criminal Court hasn't been willing to take on the issues of the massacres in Syria, one must also understand that when the Palestinians seek status at the International Criminal Court and want to bring charges, that double-edged sword means they will have to answer, how can they possibly use children as human shields? How can they possibly launch missiles from hospitals? How can they possibly abuse their own people? There has to be accountability, and Israel is not the culprit that should be held accountable for the activities that have brought us to where we are. It's the terror and the constant terror that's been going on and continues to go on and sadly will continue.
But Arad, we looked over the weekend, many of the foreign journalists that were in the Gaza Strip, and there was maybe highlighted by the social media the fact that many can't report on what they would have been seen or what they've been witness to until they leave the Gaza Strip. When you look at the reporting from around the world on this conflict, one can say that it has maybe evolved throughout the conflict into trying to present this other picture. It's just they basically cannot.
See, they work under restrictions in Gaza. There's no doubt about it. They have to worry Hamas, because Hamas is not a democratic entity. It's a rude entity. It's a cruel entity, and you know, they don't enforce free journalism. We have to understand this. On the other hand, the pictures that come out of Gaza, the destruction, the numbers of the deaths, of the injuries, you know, these are not made up. Yes, they make war crimes. They are war criminals. They hide in hospitals. They hide in schools. They hide among civil population, and this imposes very, very difficult decisions and very difficult I don't have another word for it, but it's a difficult situation that Israel is in it. You know, ABC News in the United States during the weekend revealed a recording of Bill Clinton just before 9/11, 2001, revealing or saying to a group of friends that in the late 90s, he, as a president, had an opportunity to kill Osama bin Laden. The problem was, he said, that in order to kill him, he had to wipe out the whole of Kandahar and kill 300 people. Now, if he would have killed them in the late 90s, maybe he would have saved 3,000 Americans on 9/11. So that's the decision, that's the dilemma that we are stating it in every other day.
A Finnish reporter, this was a part of the segment that was running around the social media, did a report about rockets being fired here. You can. This is the segment that was, I think, shared throughout the world, and of rockets being fired from the Shifa hospital. This is, of course, her report is in Finnish, so I will not attempt to translate right now. Yossi, when you look at the objectives that have been achieved up until now, and of course where Israel is going to leave, and the international, of course, media that's going to at least be with the unilateral withdrawal until it actually leaves. What can you say that the IDF can say, yes, we have a decisive, crushing victory over Hamas, and here's the areas that we did actually were victorious over Hamas?
When we measuring the success of this operation or war, we have to measure it against the goals stated by the cabinet. And the prime goal was to bring calm back and peace to Israel.
But we've seen that it's not going to happen.
Well, we'll see. That was the prime goal before the ground incursion. Once the ground incursion took place, the cabinet stated another goal: to demolish, to destroy the tunnels. That is going to be achieved tonight. In the long run. Hopefully. Well, no, it's going to be achieved. I'm not sure all the tunnels would be uncovered.
And that's something that the defense minister has said. There's no one that can say that.
But you see, there is no limit to it. But Israelis have a very short memory on one end, and on the other hand, then they mixed and confused tactical events with the overall strategic picture. That happened in 2006. During the war and immediately after the Second Lebanese War, Israelis were in desperation. They were frustrated. 8 years later, we see that strategically, despite the flaws and the tactical misunderstandings, that war was a successful war. There is a peace and quiet. 8 years, peace and quiet to the Galilee. I think Hamas was defeated, suffered major casualties. Its major projects have been uncovered and demolished. The tunnels, the rockets have been reduced to 1/3. There is already a demilitarization of Gaza. Why? Because they cannot bring weapons inside Gaza.
Although they have been able to up until now.
So I think deterrence will work, but of course I'm not a prophet. I believe that a deterrence of 3-5 years would be in place.
And Hamas will accept this isolation for 3-5 years?
Well, the siege would be lifted. That's part of the deal. The siege would be lifted. The border crossing would be opened under better inspection.
And remember that Hamas is the Islamic resistance movement. They will continue resistance in every possible way. They're not only in Gaza, they are elsewhere. We will see activities, God forbid, in the West Bank.
We just break. Thank you all for joining. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to I-24 News Morning Edition. Of course, we are on a special broadcast this morning. It is day 27 of Operation Protective Edge. Rockets have been sounding throughout the south of Israel since this morning. And we also know that the Hamas delegation from Qatar has left Doha and is going to be arriving soon in Cairo for the start of talks. This, of course, comes after the Prime Minister of Israel yesterday said that Israel will not be joining the talks in Cairo for now, and has said that Israel will unilaterally withdraw its troops once it finishes its missions there. All options still are on the table. With me now in studio is the International Director of the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, Yuha Katola. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Katola.
Thank you.
The Israel Director of J Street, Misiel Patir. Thank you for joining us. And Gabi Tartakovsky, I-24 News correspondent. You'll be here very soon with more press from around the world. I want to start with you, Yael. We look at a lot about, throughout these 27 days that we've been looking here in Israel at the international credit or the window of opportunity that Israel has been given. And of course, we automatically look to our biggest strategic ally, the United States. When you look at it over the 27 days, one will say it hasn't been consistent. It really hasn't we can't say, this administration has backed this operation from the start. It has been kind of shaky.
I think also the Israeli government has been kind of shaky. Mm-hmm. So the attempt to draw a straight line of strategy when for us it is clear that the Israeli government doesn't have a very clear strategy, and to look at the United States and to say they have been shaky, I think the United States have reacted to the operation and to the developments. And I think we saw in the past, that a lot of internal political considerations and games are thrown into the relationship between Israel and the United States.
You think it's personal and not...
I don't know if it's... Perhaps it's also personal, but I think that what we see in the media, and definitely what the media is, highlighting, which is more interesting for the audience, is not necessarily what happens in closed doors. And I think that there is a consistent, the famous unshakable bond between Israel and the United States, and it's something that is not, at least throughout this operation, can't be challenged, although there has been definitely last weekend a lot of criticism in Israel on Secretary Kerry's
his proposal for a ceasefire, which many not only were critical within the Israeli public opinion, but also in the Israeli media, saying Kerry is like an alien that landed off of Mars and is presenting this plan. Is this also due not only because of the foreign policy of this administration, but also public opinion in the United States? Has that been impacting this administration?
I think definitely. I mean, the administration, as any political body, is influenced by public opinion in the United States. But I think that we see that the public opinion in the United States is quite supportive of Israel, even through this operation. And we see, I would say just recently, more criticism that is coming perhaps more so from the constituency of President Obama, meaning young liberals that are questioning what is happening in the operation, and that are questioning the the green light that Israel has been receiving from the beginning of the operation. It's definitely something that is taken into consideration. But I also, I'm also always very weary. We see in the media in the past month or so, we see that there are trends. And we don't see a lot of questioning of those trends. Right. I think it's also the case when we talk about the United States.
But when you look at Operation Protective Edge as opposed to other operations, and you look at, of course, the United States support, what was different this operation was perhaps the overwhelming support that Israel got within its own population and within its own cabinet. So something like J Street is usually looking towards, other parts of the Israeli society, maybe the left part, the opposition, and so forth. Was it more difficult this time to reach out to people from the opposition?
No. I mean, I think that, I actually think that the reaction in Israel to this operation is quite similar to the reaction in Israel to Cast Lead. I think there is overwhelming support now as there was then. I think there is a trend in Israel of quieting the opposition voices, which is quite new. people find it more hard and more scary to speak out their minds if it's a position against the operation. But when it comes to J Street, I think J Street has a challenging spot. You know, it is a pro-Israel, pro-peace organization, very much that has the security of Israel first and foremost in its mind, but also has the two-state solution in its mind.
But that's something that nobody even in the opposition will talk about today. I mean, we've heard from Bougie Herzog, the opposition leader. He can't bring up the two-state solution. He can't bring up Mahmoud Abbas now. He'll be killed, quote-unquote, politically. I
think what we hear from the opposition, both from Labour, mainly from Labour as well as from Meretz, we hear the sentence of understanding that there's no military solution to this operation. I think that is something that I also hear from Bougie Herzog, the head of opposition, the understanding that diplomacy must, be the next step, and that we must reach an agreement with the Palestinian Authority. The difference is what support they give the operation and to what extent. But I think definitely the opposition is understanding the limitation of military power.
And a lot of the international credit that we've been speaking about here has been due to the Prime Minister Netanyahu's ability to reach out to world leaders and show them, yes, this is Israel's right to self-defense. What hasn't been very successful is public opinion on the international street. And I'm thinking, the pictures coming out of Paris and London, also from the United States, of self-defense not really making the cut. You organized, you and your team in the International Christian Embassy organized a whole different kind of protest in support of Israel. And basically, because of your quote-unquote profile, it's gaining headlines.
Yes, it's if I may use this word, delightful at this context, which is, but it's been good. We have organized some pro-Israel rallies in Europe, for example, in Finland, where I'm coming from, in Germany. There's been in Ireland. There's even one today actually going on in Johannesburg and Cape Town in South Africa.
And what makes who are these people that are coming out to the street, and what makes them, say unequivocally that they do support Israel, even something that, as Yael and I spoke now, something you can't even find in Israel sometimes?
I think it's because they are evangelical Christians. And they have open mind to listen to what the leadership in Israel is saying and why things are happening. I believe, and I think that they have actually a big picture on their mind. They see the challenges that is coming towards Israel, and the limitations of the solutions. So they see fully how Israel has the right to defend, and not only the right, they are obligated. They have to defend their own civilians and people.
And when they do go on the streets of these capital cities, as you mentioned, are there any tensions rising between opposing protests, counter-protests?
In Finland, where we organized this, our pro-Israel rally was larger in numbers than the pro-Palestinian rallies.
And this is only evangelical Christians, or could you say that there's other parts of the population?
There was Jewish community with us, yes. But it's true that it's such a sad thing. That the grassroots, what's going on in the minds of the people in the grassroots, they get not publicity. So people don't know, they don't realize what's going on. That's why we organize these rallies where we have a platform concerning the media to show that there are a lot of people. Actually, I'm not exaggerating, there are millions of Christians in the world who are supporting Israel, really.
How does that influence, if at all, the political leadership in these countries? Many times we see this, very big disconnect between what the political leadership is saying, for instance, just taking the UK and France as an example, and what's actually happening on public opinion in the streets.
It might take a while. In Europe, there are governments maybe less favorable towards Israel, but in the grassroots, the evangelical Christians are for it. They have open, but they are listening. They don't have preconceived ideas, so they are listening. But what I'm really excited in the future is the southern hemisphere. In South America, in Africa, there are the evangelical communities are growing very fast in numbers.
South America has just brought back many of its ambassadors and recalled its ambassadors over the last operation.
Yeah, but then again, Brazil is a good example. Brazil has been very hard on Israel now concerning the political leadership. However, on the ground, you got more than about 23% of Brazilians are evangelicals. I have personally, together with our executive director, Dr. Jürgen Bühler, we have brought Knesset member from Israel to Brazil, to Manaus, where 100,000 people are gathered in a stadium, in a samba stadium, and they are greeting, the parliamentarian is greeting, the Knesset member is greeting on behalf of the State of Israel the people, and they are waving. 100,000 people are waving Israeli flags and Brazilian flags. So it takes time before it reaches the leadership in a form of the votes. You have elections, so there are more. And if the tendency continues going like this, there are more and more in numbers evangelical Christians in Southern America and in Africa specifically. And it doesn't take, if the tendency goes like this, it doesn't take long before their voice is being heard when it's elections.
But
then
do
it
they have
changes.
a political objective, these groups of people, these hundreds of thousands, as you mentioned? Are they calling also on Israel to perhaps go forward towards a two-state solution?
I'll give you a good example. I would use the word have an effect on the society for good. But, for example, remember a few years ago there was this Palestinian statehood bid in the UN? Of course. And there was this Security Council decision about to come. Our ICEJ director in Nigeria, Reverend Mose Madugba, approached the leadership of Nigeria, the president, with many Christian businessmen, with many Christian parliamentarians, and as a result, the Nigerian vote in the Security Council was the decisive vote so that the Palestinian statehood did not come through. And he received a clear, actually he received a text message from the president that they're going to vote in favor of Israel. In favor of Israel.
Yael, I wanted to take it back to the U.S.-Israeli relations. After, of course, the events of this weekend, we did see Obama come out in a statement, perhaps as we said, it was a shaky relationship throughout, and perhaps also because of the Israeli side. But this time he did reiterate, of course, Israel's right to self-defense, but did question, of course, its handling of civilian populations, something that we're not even hearing sometimes from our own government here in Israel.
Yes, I think it goes back to what I said before, which is, I know this is not part of this conversation, but it goes back to the limitation and boundaries of discourse in Israel during the war. So I don't know if it's a good thing to compare, but there was also the UN Secretary General had a statement against the abduction, and I think there was an understanding that if it happens after a ceasefire, then the blame is clearly on the side of Hamas. Right.
But of course, when you look at yesterday's press conference, Netanyahu's words talking about this regional unity that has emerged from the conflict, he doesn't name, and this is something that was also criticized also by Israeli journalists, and also, I assume, and you'll let me know, by international public opinion, he doesn't name Mahmoud Abbas as one of these partners. He doesn't really name any partner, but it would have helped, perhaps, politically to name and strengthen Mahmoud Abbas, especially as they go for talks today in Cairo.
Right. I agree. Although I also think here that it's, from what I read, I consume the media like anybody else. I also hear that there is a clear distinction, and perhaps the good thing, if there is a good thing that can come out of the war, is this clear distinction between a Palestinian leadership that doesn't choose violence as its means of achieving freedom and independence for the Palestinian, and a Palestinian leadership that does. And the understanding, and I think there is a growing understanding in the Israeli public, and I think, I hope that the Prime Minister will also reflect that understanding, that there is a partner on the Palestinian side that we can talk to and should communicate with. Well, he needs political capital
to do that, and that's something that he may not have here. The question is, are the Americans already fatigued with this Netanyahu government and going to say, we've tried it for 9 months, now you had a war, now we're not going to really push you forward towards a two-state solution? I think the American government, at the end of the day, doesn't have, even when it takes a step back, doesn't have, let's say, the privilege of sitting aside. It keeps being pulled in, exactly. And I think, J Street, our position and our constant call for the American government is to be involved, to never step back, and to be involved, and to not be tired, and to not give up on the Israeli government, with the understanding that
the Israeli public, at the end of the day, supports, a diplomatic solution. I think the Israeli government, Israeli public also, at the end of the day, even with this war and the strong voices we hear in support, understands again the limitation of this war, and understands that at the end of the day, to reach some sort of quiet and even a ceasefire, we need to negotiate. But the question is with whom we negotiate.
And when we'll get around to doing it, of course.
Exactly.
Gabi, you have some headlines from around the world.
Yes, we've been talking a lot about media bias during this operation, and Tablet Magazine follows this story. New York Times lands its own Pulitzer Prize winning photographer in Gaza.
I saw that one.
It all started when GTA reporter Uriel Heilman asked how come with all the pictures shown in the New York Times and various galleries dedicated to the fighting in Gaza, there is no single photo from the 37 photos selected which presents Hamas rocket launch or any of Hamas's militants' activities.
Right.
Now, Eileen Murphy, the Times vice president for corporate communications, replied and said, our photo editor went through all of our pictures recently, and out of many hundreds, she found 2 very distinct, poor-quality images. Now, this comes as a bit of a shock. I mean, obviously, we've seen reporters and photojournalists tweet high-resolution photos on their personal Twitter accounts. The fact that there is no allegedly a high-res photo of Hamas activities in Gaza is suspicious. Is debatable, but Murphy continued and said, I would add, the New York Times does not withhold photos of Hamas militants. We eagerly pursue photographs from both sides of the conflict, but sadly...
Meaning putting the blame on the photojournalist himself.
Yes, and he's doing a great job. I've been following him on Twitter. He's doing a great job.
Taylor Hicks.
Yes,
right?
Taylor Hicks. There's enough photos of Hamas activities in Gaza to shown around the world, alongside the Israeli activities in Gaza as well.
And of course, this comes after we just saw many journalists saying that they're afraid or scared to report on what's happening until they leave Gaza. And this Finnish journalist that we saw before is making her way around the social networks as well.
Yes, so there is a place for an editorial note about the situation rather than dismiss it completely.
Indeed. What else do you have?
Speaking of Media Watch, the New Statesman reports the Times of Israel pulls permissible genocide blog. The Times of Israel...
That was a big story over the weekend here. Yeah.
Definitely. The Times of Israel blogger Yochanan Gordon posted a blog post titled, When Genocide is Permissible. Gordon wrote, what other way then is there to deal with an enemy of this nature other than obliterate them completely? He also continued by saying, if political leaders and military experts determine that the only way to achieve its goal of sustaining quiet is through genocide, is it then permissible? The post was quickly removed on Friday. The Times of Israel clarified that this is a post which is damnable and ignorant and bluntly breached the Times of Israel's editorial guidelines.
We have to just also note that this is a blog platform that anyone can really just upload their own blog post. Not that, of course, that it makes it okay, but it obviously did its damage around the world.
Yes, the Times of Israel operate this open blog platform, and once it accepts a particular blogger, he is free to post whatever he likes, but there is still certain limitations, and the blog was removed, and the blogger himself also apologized.
Okay, well, he's not going to be blogging anytime soon. That we can be sure of, hopefully.
Absolutely. Moving on, The Economist features a cover story regarding Israel, saying Israel is winning the battle but losing the war. The Economist profiles the day after, if you will, after this current operation ends, saying plenty of Israel's own standpoint, saying Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is the regional superpower, yet it's losing valuable points in world opinion. In a recent poll published in June, they said citizens of 23 countries were asked, do you think Israel is a good influence or a bad influence on the world? And Israel scored minus 26%, ranking below Russia and only above North Korea, Pakistan, and Iran.
Wow.
No.
When you hear this kind of headlines, one has to ask, your political power as representing these groups of Christians around the world, is it not also perhaps will be viable to use this power of support to direct it to political objectives? Because yes, we might be winning the battle, but we're losing this overall war, as The Economist wrote.
Absolutely, we really want to do our best concerning that the message will go out also from our mouths. Absolutely, and this is sad. You know, this is really sad. You know, people, like I said, the evangelical world is open to listen, to have the whole picture. It looks to me that people are lazy. They don't want to get into the roots. They don't want to rise up, you know, to see that what is actually going on. And it's so unfair towards Israel. You know, Israel is, like you said, the only democracy in the Middle East. Look at the women's, you know, how the women are being treated, or how is the educational world in the surrounding nations in Israel. And what is more surprising to me is that the people who, you know, they label themselves from the left in Europe, they are ready to work together with extreme terrorist organizations. Mm-hmm. And they have absolutely different values. The left is for the women, for the education, for everything. The terrorist organizations are putting down the women, the education. And how can they be together? It's amazing for me.
Yeah, when you look at this Economist headline, and I'm sticking onto it, of course, because I do feel that there's a lot of truth in it for Israeli politicians themselves. I think that many politicians do believe that, and it's not now is not the time to maybe voice that.
Yes, it's definitely an issue of timing, and I want to connect it to two things that you have said. One was about listening, mm-hmm. and I think it's extremely important for all sides, and, you know, people holding all sorts of opinions to listen. I can say definitely for myself, I've been, you know, active in pro-peace activity and in supporting the two-state solution. And this last round has also brought questions to my mind. And I think that if people don't question their assumptions, something is definitely wrong. But I also, you know, I want to add, and also when we talk about the roots, we can't look at this situation in a vacuum. You know, we can't look at this situation without looking at the roots of the conflict, looking at the situation of the occupation, looking at the situation of people living in Gaza without
people living in the south, of course.
People living in the south, exactly. And I think people around the world need to take all these things into consideration, as well as, you know, as people in Israel when they form their opinion. And I'm quite happy, and I think it's a very successful position that J Street holds. That on the one hand, you know, last week we had here an emergency delegation that came to visit the region, and in only 48 hours we managed to be in the south under rockets, to visit soldiers in the hospital, mm-hmm. also to visit the Bedouin family that was wounded by the rockets, but also to hear a person from Gaza and to hear his testimony from within, and to talk with Palestinian and Israeli peace activists. And I think that the ability to hold all those things together is extremely important during this time, and I encourage everybody to do so, even if it seems more difficult.
And more difficult, and sometimes it raises more questions than gives you answers.
Absolutely. It's good also to have questions with no answers.
Maybe that's a better deal for now, at least. Gabi, what else do you have?
The Guardian says U.S. Senate unanimously approves over $220 million in funding for Israel's Iron Dome. On Friday, the funding was approved by the Senate. An earlier plan to fund was failed on Thursday when Senate Republicans blocked a broader spending bill that was also aimed to tackle the American immigration crisis with the Mexican border.
Yeah, were people surprised about this? I mean, here in Israel, I think the media was super surprised that Republicans would be the ones that blocking. Does it show or point at some kind of trend?
I think if I zoom out very quickly to answer it, there is a definitive trend in both Republicans and Democrats in the United States that people who follow American politics, it's very clear that there is a reduction of the desire
unconditional support,
unconditional, but also the desire of from right and from left in the United States for the Americans to be more involved in the world, mm-hmm. And this is something that is in common to people that don't necessarily come from the same political camps.
So nothing to also look at as a trend. This is not something that obviously it was passed in the end. Israel did get this funding.
Yes, well, the funding must still pass the House of Representatives, and President Obama must sign it to be finally materialized. But there's no any major obstacles ahead.
Okay, and lastly?
Lastly, the Jerusalem Post reports that more farmers to receive agriculture compensation due to Gaza conflict. Israeli agriculture have seen better days. For the first time now, farmers located within 40 kilometers of the Gaza Strip will be able to claim compensation. Before, in the past, it was only agriculture plantations within just 7 kilometers. Now, during November Operation Pillar of Defense, the tax authority said it paid about 40 million shekels in compensation to Israeli agricultures and farmers because of indirect damages and inability to work. So there is a clear damage to Israeli agriculture this time around as well. The good news is a large compensation is to be met.
And this, of course, is going to probably definitely be part of the political discourse here in Israel afterwards. This has not been considered a war. It's been considered an operation. Yes. That has economic implications, not only for agricultural needs, but also for the economy as a whole.
Yes, and people are trying to find any compensation through various legal loopholes because for several conflicts, Israel does not declare this as a bona fide war, but rather as a conflict, as an operation. Right. And people need to be compensated for the damages in various professions they hold.
And it's definitely going to be something that's going to see also political implications also in the next campaign and so forth, how Israel survived summer of 2014 economically. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Yael, thank you. Yuha, thank you. Of course, we're just going to quickly sum up before we go to headlines from the I-24 news desk. The day 27 of Operation Protective Edge started early this morning with rockets sounding throughout the night, and Israel Air Force attacking some targets in Rafah in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Late last night, the IDF did confirm that the Givati Brigade officer Hadar Golden, who according to initial assessments had been captured in Gaza on Friday morning in a Hamas attack, had been killed. Of course, earlier we heard the family of Hadar Golden holding an emotional press conference imploring the government not to leave their son behind in Gaza. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the IDF will soon redeploy its troops when the work of demolishing Hamas tunnels is done, but did reiterate that all options are still open for how the operation continues from here. We're going to be updating you throughout the day here at I-24 News, of course, of the Cairo delegation and Cairo talks, which Israel has opted not to take part in. There's going to be more from the news desk throughout the day. I'm Yael Wisner-Levy. We'll be here tomorrow.